What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to For All Nerd Kind. I'm your host, Cousin Ryan, with my great co-host, my buddy Josh.
How you doing, buddy?
Very, very well. So I appreciate everybody who's been watching and coming along this journey with us.
Dude, hold on. Let's look. We are at
338 about an hour ago.
338?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Yep. I like it. Dude, everybody watched. Thank you. That's so cool. Like that, I think I think that's past our first video, the intro video, but I think that intro video has been up for 4 weeks, a month, and this did it in a week. It's crazy. It's awesome. I love it.
Good time, man. All right. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to jump into this real quick before we get into the nerd news stuff. Again, thank you, everybody, for watching. We're going to go ahead and bring in one of my really good friends, one of the hosts from What the Show. I love this guy so freaking much. It's none other than Mr. Mike Deacon.
Hey.
What's going on?
Hey, buddy.
Oh, fantastic. Excited to be here. Definitely have been loving the content. I checked out both of your first 2 episodes and excited to be able to join the fun.
I'm excited that you want to jump on this end of your topic, which we'll get into in a little bit. But, I really like that you guys are reaching out and want to be a part of this. I know we have someone else who's supposed to be here tonight, couldn't make it, unfortunately.
Power outage.
Yeah, man. East Coast is getting its pounded over there, aren't you guys?
Well, he's in Nebraska, so he
it's way different.
He's getting storms, I'm sure, like tornado kind of stuff, most likely.
That sounds no fun.
No fun.
Did you last night here was nuts. There was a thunderstorm. How often do those happen here? A couple times a year, but
right.
Last night it woke me up dead sleep. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning and scary shit. I thought it was like right next to my house.
You gotta remember, man, I lived in Seattle, so we had a lot of those, the rain and thunderstorms quite often. So it put me to sleep. I miss it. But all right, so Mike, we wanted to, before we get started, we do our shots to start off our show. Gentlemen, cheers to our show.
Cheers.
Tonight's episode. Oh, look at that. Whew. So, Mike, tell us a little about yourself, because I know you, but I know our viewers won't know who you are. Probably, really, some of them might because they followed us over. But go ahead, give a little background about yourself.
Absolutely. So, in terms of the internet space, I'm one of the hosts of What the Show, which Ryan has been on several times now. We've collaborated for a while. Our show is on Wednesday nights at 10 o'clock. We are pretty much just an off the rails. It's a glorified happy hour is what it is. And we sprinkle in some pop culture discussion. Sometimes we go completely off the rails. Sometimes we have topics. You never know what the hell you're going to get on an episode of What the Show. But in terms of my background, I've been very big into like geek culture my entire life. From the time I was about 2 years old, my first fandom was Masters of the Universe. And from that point forward, it's grown and grown and grown. I've always had it was Masters of the Universe, Thundercats, Silverhawks. Then it evolved to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and the real Ghostbusters. And then obviously I got a little bit older and we're going to talk about one of the big ones, in a little while. But my entire life, I've always been big into the excitement of just being engaged in all of these properties. And, some of them have had varying results. Like a lot of them, I've revisited a lot of them coming back. Like I bought a lot of DVDs from the cartoons from when I was younger, and some of them held up better than others.
Oh, yeah.
But when it comes to everything here, I saw Batman 89 in theaters when I was 6 years old. And so, I've been following all of this kind of stuff from a very, very young age. And I don't understand how anybody could not get excited by this.
And I'm glad that you said that. I love that you said that because that's kind of what the whole point of us doing this is to get people excited about talking about being a nerd. And, it's out there now. It's a thing. Yeah. But there's those of us who have been doing it since, the late 80s, mid to late 80s, early 90s. And we now have a space to talk about it. So
right.
I'm really excited. I'm so glad that you were here. So glad. And I'm glad that you get to be a part of our next segment, the Nerd News Network. And we're going to talk about some of the big things that's happened over the past few weeks.
I have one question for him first.
Yeah, go for it.
Who's your favorite Ninja Turtle?
Michelangelo. Always was, always will be.
All right.
That tracks for you.
Had a soft spot for Mikey my whole life.
Awesome.
That means he can stay, right?
Yep, he can stay. He's in.
So
All right.
I actually, you want a little piece of like how geeky I am.
Yes.
My mother grew up working at a toy store, and I have a discontinued original April O'Neil figure that they found that she put aside from me. That they had to discontinue the figure because the legs fell off. I have it in the package. And
Never opened?
Never opened. We have never.
Wow.
It's still sitting in the packaging. I never opened it. I've never really looked into exactly what it's worth, but they had the first line of Ninja Turtles. They discontinued pretty quickly because the Turtles had soft heads. They got rid of that and switched them to the hard heads. And April O'Neil, they outright recalled. So like they wanted those ones back. I have that one. Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy. It's original, never opened. Man, that's cool. I couldn't keep any of that. I have a 5-year-old, and she went to my parents' house, and they had a Furby. Remember those Furbies?
Mm-hmm.
How huge those were at the time? Had one unopened. She saw it at Grandma's house. Said, "I want that." Grandma says, "Okay," and I'm like, "What are you doing?"
If it was an original, holy crap!
Yeah,
yep.
For real.
It worked, and it was depressing, but she had fun.
Well, I will say I don't have, for toys wise, I have to open all my toys and play with them because I'm just a kid at heart still. But I do have a vast amount of comic books that I have never opened, and they will never be opened. So, I get it. I totally understand that. So, okay, so let's jump into the next thing real quick. The first big news that I heard that we talked about, I think earlier today, Josh, was The Boys season 4 being delayed.
Yeah. That's, well, of course, like we talked about on the last episode, it's the writer's strike, possibly has some of what to do with that. They bounced back today, though, because said, season 4 is going to be delayed, but guess what? In 2 days, they're going to be available on Call of Duty, which is weird. But, I mean, they're keeping their name out there because how did they say how long it was going to be delayed for?
I didn't see a timeline.
Yeah, see, and it's not necessarily good, but being put out in Call of Duty, that's going to help them a little bit. But just the anticipation for that next season. Did you watch all the seasons? Have you guys seen all the seasons?
I'm caught up.
Yeah,
I've seen all of them, but
yeah. Like, I'm so excited, but now we're going to wait for God knows how long in the strike, and then the Screen Actors might actually jump into that whole strike. So nobody works if that's the case. Movies are done, TV shows are done, and then they go into panic mode trying to figure this out until you can strike a deal. But
the next 2 years are going to be ugly.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
100%. It's pretty scary.
Well, and to roll into what you said, I actually just read before we went live with this, started recording, was that they are suggesting to actors to skip Comic-Con if the Actors Guild does strike. So not only did the big names of Marvel and Netflix and Paramount and those decide not to present in Hall H, they might not have anyone show up to Comic-Con this year.
Which is, it's insane because I remember growing up, the only thing I wanted to do, like, I'm going to grow up someday and I'm going to go to Comic-Con in San Diego. Like, it was the biggest comic, anything, nerd related, where it was just massive for days on days. The huge screenings, the huge reveals, like, there was a certain kind of atmosphere for that. Even just watching the reaction videos of, like, coming in a couple years, Avengers Secret Wars, like the crowd going crazy. You're not going to have that now.
No.
And then everything's going digital. So it's rough because I can never go to those events now. It's not.
Do you guys have, and this is probably an ignorant question of me, but did you guys have those kind of cons on the east side that you guys would go to, Deacon? Big ones?
So there's several. In Orlando, there's one called MegaCon. They don't really do the announcements. You get everything else. Like, San Diego gets all the announcements. Like San Diego, D23, Star Wars Celebration, and to an extent, New York Comic Con. And I know Comic Con Brazil tend to get the announcements. In Orlando, there's MegaCon. In Atlanta, there's Dragon Con. That's a big one. That's a real big one. But in terms of, like, they're more regional. They're not like something that's going to be reaching a nationwide or worldwide audience. These are more for specifically the people in our area.
That's cool. So did you go to those pretty regularly?
So I've been to MegaCon. We just left Orlando last year. We're currently in Savannah, which is actually about equal distant from Atlanta or Orlando. So we're pretty far from both. Savannah does have a Comic-Con, but it's really, really small. Like their headline guest for the Savannah Comic-Con, which is coming up pretty soon, is Jake the Snake Roberts. Like that's their big name. So,
wow,
you know, it's nothing compared to these other ones. I've been to MegaCon several times. They typically get the same caliber of guests that like a San Diego would, minus the super A-listers. So, for example, last year they had like the entire cast of Cobra Kai showed up. Like that's
cool.
An example of, you know, the level of celebrity they would get. But there's nothing new coming out of those. Those are more just for the enjoyment of being there, more walking the floor, more, you know, getting the Q&As and things like that. But you're not going to get anything new out of those the way you do out of San Diego.
Okay, so it's fun story about the Cobra Kai people, and not really funny, more of I screwed up. But last year when we were young, it was late in the night. It was one of the last shows, and I was sitting on the ground just watching one of the last side bands before Paramore got up. And so we were just hanging out, and I realized these two people standing next to me had their hoods up. It was night, but they looked familiar, and I couldn't put my finger on it until 2 days later, Mary Mauser posted a selfie of her and one of the other guys from Cobra Kai watching the show, standing right there. It was them. Like they were standing right next to us. In my head,
Tanner, who she's dating.
It was Tanner Buchanan, yeah. But yeah, they were standing right there next to us, and it was sad that I didn't realize that's who it was. So I'm a little disappointed in myself. But I was spoiled when I lived in Seattle because we had the Emerald City Comic-Con, and it took place a block away from my work, from my office. So I got to see some of the coolest outfits and cosplay and everything else that you could imagine. So never got to go to the San Diego Comic-Con, but Emerald Con was pretty sweet. Emerald City Con was pretty sweet. So.
We're redecorating. I just so happen to have these at arm's reach. So just to show you, like, this is from MegaCon. That's Jonas Suetamo, who is the new Chewbacca.
Yeah.
That is Ray Park. Darth Maul.
I'm a big fan of Ray Park.
That's awesome.
Billy D.
Lando.
I have, this one's my favorite. It's Donald Faison, Turk.
Turk.
And Sam Witwer who voiced Darth Maul.
I like Sam Witwer. He's a great voice actor for sure.
Yeah, he was in he was Starkiller, wasn't he? No, he was.
He was
Starkiller, and he was in Smallville. He was in Smallville.
Yeah.
Well, he played Doomsday. It was weird, but I remember him.
Voice.
Yeah, he had the voice. He has the voice.
Yep.
Okay, so let's move into the next topic real quick because we have a lot to cover in the news network for this week. Okay, so moving into, you mentioned it real quick earlier, but we're going to go ahead and talk about it. Season 4 of Call of Duty, the reload of Season 4 for Call of Duty. The COD Squad was on What the Show, so if anybody who's on there wants to go back and watch that episode, it was fantastic. Me and my three buddies on the squad. Josh knows all of them as well. He plays with us. He's one of our fill-ins when we are down a guy, but he actually might be playing a lot more since one of us jumped to Diablo and isn't coming back apparently. So, but yeah, the Season 4 reload, they're putting out the boys skins that are coming with the reload, and they're changing some of the maps to be Battle Royale instead of Resurgence, which is interesting. I know there's a lot of fans out there who know that Ravensoft and Activision need to fix Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2. They need to fix it bad, do it soon. Josh, you jumped in the other day with us and dropped in on Vondel. What do you think? What was your...
It's still good. Like, it's never going to be Warzone 1. Just different engine, just different movement. And they pretty much cemented it to where Warzone 3 is going to be the next one where they say, okay, movement's back to how it was. Here's new maps, back to their same shit. So, haven't played it for like a month, but it felt good. The new map I like. It's a little small for Battle Royale, so we'll see. But I don't know. COD's always fun. That's pretty much the only game I get to play nowadays. So, hop on for a few hours, play with the boys. It's not bad. So, in terms of entertainment, it's not going to get old.
and I know we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I know, Deacon, we've talked before on other shows that you are an old school video game fan.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm going to challenge you at some point one of these days, whenever we get to finally hang out. We're going to play old school video games. So, did you ever, before, I know we're going to get to it, but like, what was in the 90s era, what was your games of play? What was like your nerdy things that you carried with you?
Depends on the system. I will start with the NES. There was a game called Baseball Stars that was made by SNK.
Yep.
And it was one of the first games that like kept records. Like NES usually wasn't able to do that. So like you could do full seasons and stuff on that, which NES was notoriously bad about. So I really like that. I was big into the Ninja Turtle games, not the first one, but the second and third on the end. The first one was the most frustrating games of all time, and I do not recommend anybody attempting it if you never have. Those were all very big ones. I moved on to Sega Genesis. We're going to talk about the big one. But also on Sega Genesis, I was big into the NHL games, the EA NHL games. They were originally NHL PA before 93. Then they just switched to NHL 94 on. I was really, really big into those. Those were real big ones. And then I had a 64. The obvious answer is GoldenEye. I mean, I don't know anybody who owned that system who's not going to have that answer. And the other one, though, the big one on 64 was WWF No Mercy, which was probably to this day the best wrestling game that ever came out. So
I would fight you on that because there was one on the 64. It was the WCW versus NWO game.
It's the same game, but
is it the
No
same
Mercy
game?
was souped up. It's the same engine.
Okay. I love that game. I remember No Mercy, but I was more of an WCW fan at the time. That was like my era for it. So, Josh, do you have any idea what we're talking about at this point?
I do. I was actually going to say a wrestling entertainment episode would be amazing. But that, like I love wrestling games. I can't remember which games they were. I remember there was some for the 64, but I just don't remember their names. But I remember playing as like Stone Cold and The Rock. Oh, they were so fun.
Either No Mercy or WrestleMania 2000. Those are the two for 64 that had the two of them.
Yeah.
What was the handheld? So it wasn't a Game Boy. I want to say it was like a PlayStation Portable.
PSP.
Well, there's a PSP, but there was one before the PSP that people forget about.
Yeah, I think it's that one. It was a big blocky one. It was
yes.
Shit. That's going to bug me until I figure out what that was. But the one and only game I had for that, Mortal Kombat.
See, I owned the Sega Game Gear. Is that what you're thinking of?
That might have been it.
It could have been the Game Gear. Yep.
So, yes, it was the whatever that was. I think it was 8-bit, but like it was color, which had the advantage over Game Boy, but the gameplay was not as good as the Game Boy.
No, not at all. I remember I only had one game, and it was for a reason. Like it wasn't great. But Mortal Kombat, I mean, for a portable game, I'd love a fighting game. Like if I were to get a handheld again, and just have a fighting game for a couple hours. But
so I actually just busted out my Game Boy Color the other day to play some Pokemon. Some Pokemon Gold. You know, it's the way to go. So
man.
Handheld games will forever live in my heart.
Yep. Now we got phones.
We'll go ahead and move on to the next quick one real quick that I want to bring up that I read. Echo, the new TV series for Disney Plus that is supposedly coming, does not look good. They almost Supergirled the crap out of it, from what I heard. So for those of you who don't know, that means they just almost, even though it's done, they almost trashed it.
And they're saying
Batgirl. Sorry,
Batgirl.
Dude, yeah, you know, when they announced that there was going to be an Echo TV show, they announced it with a whole load of other shows like Ms. Marvel, Moon Knight. Everybody was so pumped, you know. But Echo, I remember Echo just being the only one like, does she need a show? Like, you know, her role in Hawkeye was good. She was a good character, but do I see myself being interested in her backstory, like diving deeper into her bigger role? I don't know. I was excited because it was supposed to have Matt Murdock in it. He was going to cameo a couple times. Kingpin obviously has to because that's the main guy. But you know, when I heard that they weren't going to go through with it, or they are, it's almost done, but they're not sure about it. I'm sitting there kind of like, I mean, Is it good? Is it good enough to compete with Secret Wars? Right? Yeah, Secret Invasion. Is it good enough to keep up with Moon Knight? Definitely not Moon Knight. Moon Knight was awesome. So I don't know, with their whole new agenda kind of thing, since they fired or somebody was let go at Disney and they gave the company back to, names are just getting past me, but he's taken over now and he says it's quality over quantity now. Like, I'm back in control. We've been kind of slipping for a while. So I think we're going to go back to quality over quantity, which is great. But that just means things like Echo maybe aren't up to his standards. Maybe that's why Avengers got pushed a couple years, or a year, exactly a year for both of them. You know, maybe they want to work on the stories. They're putting out less movies. So after movies like Eternals and all those other ones that underperformed, he's sitting there like, we need to work on our game.
So I think who you were talking about was Kathleen Kennedy, who
Yep.
was the president of Disney, and she still is on board with LucasArts films, which is interesting. I don't 100% blame her for some of these things rolling out. Everyone was riding the Marvel wave as hard as they could.
Yep.
So I get it. I think the idea of Echo is a good idea, but they probably would need a lot of star power to carry the show further than one season. You know, it wasn't the best villain in Hawkeye to root against. I don't know. It would have been hard for it. So we'll see if they come out with the show. We'll see what it does. I'm trying to keep high hopes from it because I love the actress. I love the idea of it, especially with Kingpin involved. But it's going to be a hard show to carry for sure because even as a comic book fan, Echo isn't huge. So,
yeah, I'd much rather prefer her to show up in Daredevil and kind of cover her story there, because Daredevil is going to be the longest Disney Plus show that they're coming out with. It's like 20. I want to say they got a season order for like 24 episodes.
It's like a full regular season of what a network would have. Yeah,
exactly. But all these other shows that you see nowadays, where they're
12.
quality over content, it's you get 8 episodes, you get 8 weeks, and then it's done. So the fact that what's that?
That's what I wanted to say right there, though, is they are releasing Echo all at once, which Disney Plus has not done yet. This is the first one they are releasing as a binge model because they were just like, just throw it out there. We're not going to go ahead and put the marketing push into it. Like, you look at Secret Invasion, every week they are pushing their new episode. Like, even on network TV, they are advertising for it. They're pushing it. Echo, they are just throwing out there.
Right.
It's funny you speak of Secret Invasion. I was talking about earlier as well, but back to our kind of the writers' strike and all that AI, that intro was made completely by AI. Yeah. So that it's kind of a kick to the nuts for that strike right now, because for a show to come out, which granted it's not doing very great numbers wise from what I hear, from what I've read, but it's still a good show. I like the show. But when I showed my wife the intro and I said, that was made by AI, like, it blew her mind. And I was like, this is what writers and soon to be actors are fighting for, is that they didn't, how many jobs were lost right there compared to the old shows where they had a whole set crew to make that intro, and now they made it through AI. It's nuts.
So what's funny is you say that, because I knew nothing about the AI intro until after that first episode. And when I watched that intro, I thought it was garbage, personally. I was like, and so for me thinking, oh, okay, maybe a writer would have come something more creative than this splashy thing. I don't know. I didn't think it was great. The intro, at least, the show, I think is incredible. I think they're building up to something huge. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see, man. We'll see what happens, because I think it's a balance right now, 50-50. Some think the AI is going to be good. Some think it's going to be absolute garbage and not bring anything new to the table.
So what I'll say, though, like to pick up here, like the AI, obviously the Secret Invasion one, like that AI had to have come pretty last minute, because from Secret Invasion's release date dating back to when the writer's strike was, that was in the can. Like, the show was in the can before that. So they literally had to have put that intro together fairly last minute. And I think that also probably reflects, they probably went into a little bit of a panic, like had their deadlines and stuff, and they didn't meet it before the writer's strike ended. So then they had to throw something together, and they probably didn't quality control it. They just put it on there because they needed something. And for that very reason, not only it's a double whammy, because AI made it and they didn't have time to redo it. So it just kind of was what it was.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ryan. When I saw it, I was like, the more appealing thing to me was that it's AI. I didn't think it was great. I mean, they have some great intros, but that definitely wasn't it. The whole thought of it to me was just like, this is kind of wild that they actually used it. That they're showing that they, without knowing that it was made by AI, you would never know. Like, so I hope a lot of people now know and go look at it, but before, who really knew that it was made from AI? It's crazy.
Right. I want to go back to one thing you said earlier. Bethany brought this up to me, and this is something that I found very interesting because you said Secret Invasion maybe is not doing as good as people hoped. The writer's strike is affecting things in a way that I did not realize. My wife brought it up to me. She's like, the older audience, people like our parents' ages, a lot of what they get comes from talk shows. Like when people are doing their media blitzes and sending all the actors out. Samuel L. Jackson did not get to go on Fallon, did not get to go on Colbert. That whole media blitz went away. So not only is this writer's strike affecting things in the future, it's affecting things that are already made because they're not able to go through their traditional media outlets. And Bethany said that to me. I'm like, wow, I did not think about that. But that is absolutely right when you're talking to a large portion of the population. Not everybody is as dialed in on the internet as we are. And your general population, some of the movies that came out, that look at The Flash, they didn't get to do anything with that. You're telling me if Michael Keaton went on Fallon or Colbert or something like that, that wouldn't have brought the older generation back to the theater? They probably aren't even aware of it.
No, that's a super fair point. I've never thought of it like
I never
that.
thought of it that way either.
So that is when you think of it, that probably is the only outlet for that generation. So, and I mean, it's hard enough for me scouring the internet while I'm at work to keep up with all the TV shows. Like, there's shows out there I've never even seen because I've never heard about it. And then I see something online and it's like, oh, could this be a great new show on Netflix? How long has this been out? It's been out for a couple of years. Holy shit, So yeah, the different outlets for the different generations is a crazy thought to, that kind of marketing.
100%.
Yeah, I never thought of it that way. And the writer's strike, and then the actors' strike is going to cause a lot of problems. I think here very soon we're going to see some weird stuff with TV shows and numbers. So we'll see what happens. Which actually is funny. Will bring us into the next thing that I want to talk about. We probably will have an episode about this with someone, but The Walking Dead has two spinoffs going right now: Dead City, and then the new Norman Reedus, the Daryl show, Daryl Dixon, what's going to come out as well. I told you backstage before we got started, I think they're saturating the crap out of The Walking Dead. I'm done with it. I was a big fan of the graphic novels. I don't know what's going on. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, you and I were talking, and it was, we stopped at season 6, season 7, and then, like, out of nowhere, 6 months ago, I was like, I want to finish the series. It's over now. Like, it's done. Why not finish it? Starting from season 1 would be awful, but I was like, I'm already 3/4 of the way there. Fuck it, let's watch it. And it wasn't so bad to the point where I couldn't get through an episode. I got through every episode. There were parts that I enjoyed. There were lots of parts that I didn't like, and then lots of times I'm like, God, this feels like I've watched this the last 10 years of my life, nonstop every weekend, because they had Fear the Walking Dead. There was another Walking Dead to go with it. I kind of fell off when Rick left the show. That's when I called it. But now, watching Negan's story play out, watching Maggie's, and now they have their own show. I watched the first episode. It wasn't terrible. Kind of one of those things where I watched it and I was like, sometimes I miss this universe, because they go to the big city. So it gives you those, the entire time the show was in, rural areas, small towns and such. And they glimpsed on the big city in the first episode with Rick. But ever since then, you don't know what the cities are like. So it's cool. It's different. They're just hordes everywhere. And they're, I don't know, not without ruining it. It's not terrible. I'm going to keep watching it. And now there's a Daryl show. And he's in France somehow. And then there's going to be, I think, another spinoff of some sort. And then they wanted to make a movie with Rick, but I think that movie got turned into a show now. But I think you're just kind of grasping at straws. But, if you come out with a Rick show, I'll watch the hell out of it. But Daryl, I don't know. Negan for me is awesome. He's one of those villains that I came to just fucking love him as a villain. But his character shined through towards the end of the series, and now his new one, same old witty person. I love Jeffrey Dean Morgan, so I'll watch anything he's in.
He's awesome. Like Jeffrey Dean Morgan is awesome in just about everything he's ever done. Like that was a perfect casting there. But I have 2 questions for both of you, and the first question is: name something else currently airing on AMC TV.
Oh no.
Okay. Question number 2. The Walking Dead rights are currently owned by Skybound Entertainment. Name something else they have that has been successful.
I don't even know what Skybound is. What?
They bought the Schmodown.
Okay. Okay. That means nothing to Josh, so you might have to give him some back, but I know exactly what you're talking about. That's hilarious. Oh my goodness.
To make a very long story short, the reason a lot of people in our community know each other was from a movie trivia show that aired for a long time. That was pretty much a grassroots kind of thing. They did it on their own. They got Collider behind them at one point. Then they went independent and they got bought out by Skybound, who is known for owning Walking Dead. Within 2.5 years of being owned by Skybound canceled them. And they were a show that was completely grassroots, that was like doing pretty well with what they were doing. They tried to expand, and because they lost ownership rights, the show went kaput. So Cousin Ryan's Cousin Moose was part of it at the end. And that's part of the reason we all know each other. And so Skybound, though, like the only thing that anybody knew from them from when that all happened was Walking Dead. Everything else they have is like either very small properties or failures. And so that's what I was about to say is, so you have the AMC television network plus Skybound. This is their only thing they have. They're going to milk this to the last second.
Wow. I did not know that. I was looking at, because then I Googled it right away because I was like, I think there's something that's a production company for movies. And I was like, well, there's the movie. And then I was like, Skybound doesn't sound right. Looking at their,
probably what you're thinking of.
Yeah. And so looking at Skybound's website, I mean, they have Invincible, but that's
done. Yeah, that's Amazon. That's right. I forgot about that, but yes.
No, but that's it though. Like The Walking Dead's the most popular. I can make a case for Invincible but I didn't watch that until like 2 months ago, just because I heard it was a good show, but their season 2 has been delayed for how long? But so they're not winning whatsoever. So they should probably really work on that Rick show before anything. Which I feel like should have been first, because it gives you time away from Maggie and Negan, gives you time away from Daryl, because you've been away from Rick for how many years?
It's funny. I know we've made this connection the last episode, but I'm going to make it again. Maggie and Negan would have been perfect as Martha, Wayne, and Bruce's dad.
Yep.
Like, I would have, because they did it. They had it in that small little, in one of the Gotham TV series, I think it was, that they were.
Yeah.
In there.
I know Jeffrey Dean did. Yeah. So
yeah, as Bruce's parents, and so that would have been amazing to have them and to do what we talked about, where Martha becomes the Joker. In that whole series, they would have been fantastic for it. So. But The Walking Dead, the zombie thing, the genre itself, I feel like it's being, like you said, it is being milked for all it's worth. It's what vampires were back in the beginning of the 2000s, late 90s. They're gonna milk it, which is cool, I guess. They're all great actors. We have good actors that come from it, but at some point they just need to put it down and then come back to it later at a different time. Give some people some breathing room for it. So. But I also am very grateful for the fact that I now get to hang out with all of the Schmodown people, some of the greatest people I've ever met, that are on our other shows, and we'll talk about that later. Last topic, because I know this is the one's gonna be the biggest one that's happened for this week, and I've been nerding out about it, is all of the things being released about Deadpool 3 and what they are saying
I have a lot to say about this one.
Okay. Well, the one thing that I wanted, I know we've talked about things. We've talked about before Garner and Affleck coming back as, Daredevil and
Electra.
Oh my goodness, Electra. That's cool. The thing that I read that I was most excited about, and I'm hoping it's like real, and I hope it's in the movie, is Channing Tatum getting to do his Gambit. Character, because I wanted that movie so bad. Gambit is such a great character in the cartoons and the comic books. I love it. I'm super excited for that. Super excited.
It was kind of inevitable when you think about it, because obviously Ryan Reynolds and who's the director's name?
Ron Levy.
Yep, there he is. Yep, him. So they did Free Guy, and Channing
Which was
Tatum
great. I like that movie.
Yeah, it was one of those movies where it was an original idea, which I loved, and they knocked it out of the park in terms of cameos, in terms of everything. And when it comes to cameos, I think Channing Tatum had probably my favorite role of his.
Yeah.
Just period. Because, I mean, I've seen some of his movies, but I haven't seen, like Magic Mike and all those movies, but for him to be Gambit, it kind of makes sense, because Ryan Reynolds, all he has to do is be like, hey, you want to do this quick cameo? And everybody loved him in Free Guy. I'm sure he's going to knock it out of the park in Deadpool 3. But the one thing that came out today was Hugh Jackman's going to wear his yellow 90s inspired X-Men Wolverine outfit, which he looked amazing. Like, that's what I've been wanting since X-Men came out, is like comic accurate, and Disney nowadays, they don't give a shit. They make it look as real and crazy as possible. Like, I don't know how they keep doing it with these suits, but Hugh Jackman looks amazing in his yellow suit. I want to see him with the helmet on. I'm sure he won't have the helmet on long, but he's going to have at least one great scene with him fully suited up, and I cannot fucking wait, because when it comes to X-Men costumes, they're all so unique. They're all so crazy. They're not just the simple X. Cyclops looked awesome. There's so many iterations of Cyclops. Wolverine's got a brown outfit, and then he's got his X-Force outfits. Like, they just keep bringing new costumes in, and for them to do the yellow, like just the bright yellow, they knocked it out of the park. I'm so excited. So if everybody else's cameo has a great costume, it's going to look nuts, because Deadpool kind of coined that costume thing with the eyes. They were the first ones to do it. They never explain it. Nobody gives a shit. He has the eyes. If he didn't have the eyes, it wouldn't be Deadpool.
So I thought from the get-go, first things first, this is going to go a little bit off track, but I'll come back to track. I thought the best way they could have possibly done it, and they didn't have all the rights settled out for it, was in an Avengers movie. There should have been Deadpool just drops into a scene and he says, I'm fucking here, but he gets bleeped and he gets pissed off that he gets bleeped and just storms off the set. And then you don't see him again. You don't see him again. He's in the movie for 30 seconds, but it introduces him into the universe, and then you do the Deadpool movie. They obviously are not going that route. But aside from that, I thought that would have been perfect. Like, if they could have kept that secret and you were in the theater and he comes in and they bleep him, how pissed he would have been fantastic. So obviously, though, the big thing for me right now is I'm excited to hear about these, but I also don't want to hear about these, because I want them to be the surprise when I'm in the theaters. Like, I saw another picture today. I'm not going to spoil it because I don't want it to be spoiled the way I was, but there's a visual gag that got ruined today because of a set picture. And I'm like, let it come organically. I don't want every single cameo to be known. Like, sure, Jennifer Garner as Elektra, we know that. And so now everybody's assuming Ben Affleck's going to be in it as Daredevil. That's not 100% confirmed, but the assumption is there. I don't want to know these. I want to go see the movie and let it all happen. There's a cameo at the end of The Flash that thankfully did not leak ahead of time. You can say what you will about The Flash, but at that point, you had the wow factor. And, there's so many of the other ones got leaked. Don't leak them. Let these come organically. Who cares if they're on the set? Do you remember in Deadpool 2, if you knew ahead of time that Brad Pitt was in it for 3 seconds, like, that cameo made everybody so happy. But if you had known it ahead of time, it would have just ruined the whole thing. I'm like, this is cool to learn, but just let the movie film and let me see it in May.
Well, and what's funny to me is, so the internet's gotten worse, obviously, with people sharing information and pushing it out there. But it also makes you wonder how much of it's not only going to be a bait and switch, but is to make you lead you in the other direction.
And being Deadpool, I could see that. Like, that's the kind of shit that Ryan Reynolds would do, I think.
I agree. I mean, who knows? All this stuff could be, complete false flag type of information to us, or they, don't end up on the cutting room floor, whatever. There was, like right now they're talking about how they're going to finally tie in, if no one knows it, but how they're going to tie in Deadpool 3 to the MCU. I'm excited for them to do that, if that's the case, if they actually do it this way. And we'll talk about it behind the scenes, Josh, if you don't know what I'm talking about, because I haven't shared that with you yet that I found out. But it's just one of those things that it's possible they're doing a lot of bait and switch to the fan base, because people are going to dig and try to find out and want to know.
It's a crazy time to kind of live in, because studios didn't have to worry about shit like this before, and now they do. So that's why a lot of Marvel movies, you'll hear the cast say, "We never received a script. We got the script the day we shot, and this is what we do," so that there's no spoilers. So it's crazy you have to hide spoilers. So as much as I want to be surprised at certain things, there's things I can't get past because of just what I read on the internet and what I can't help. And it's really hard to be both a fan and studios, because on one hand, you don't want to ruin the surprise. On the other hand, people just want to know. But, it's just give and takes for me. Like there's certain things I'm going to learn. The only thing I don't do is Flash came out on Friday. It's Wednesday. Here's my review. Spoilers alert. I'm not going to read that. I'll read that afterwards and see your thoughts. Right. The full-on spoilers, like in the middle of this movie, this happened. No, I'm not reading that. Like,
well, and that's why that episode we did, the Flash episode, we didn't provide true spoilers. But before we did, even when you did release some things that were already kind of known, you said it before you said it. You gave people time. But that's not. I agree. You don't need to give people spoilers. Give them the highlight overviews. Don't tell them things that people are supposed to be surprised with. Give us the gist of the movie. Give us the gist of what it is. So we'll see. This might be a total bait switch. You never know.
God. They can't. It's impossible to ruin this movie for me. It's been the main basis for it is it's a multiversal trip with Deadpool and Wolverine. Like, it doesn't get more ridiculously awesome than that sounds.
Well, and the whole X-Men tie-in, it goes full circle from the original movie where he, what Cyclops says, "What, did you want to wear a yellow spandex suit?" Like, it's finally full circle if they actually do it. So they finally gave the fans the fan service they wanted.
And that's good fan service too. There is good fan service and there's bad fan service. That's paying off a joke that came out 23 years ago.
Right.
So
I love it.
Yeah, I'm so stoked because I remember X-Men Origins Wolverine, that 2 minutes of banter between the 2 minutes of banter between Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds, just that made the movie for me. Like, just them bouncing off each other, him grumpy as shit, and Ryan Reynolds never shutting up. Oh, I love that little preview of Deadpool we got, and then they completely ruined him. And then Ryan Reynolds said, "Nope, I can't do this. You need to give me a movie." And he got his movie, and now look at him. It's nuts. It's crazy.
We got our Merc with the mouth. We got what the fans really wanted with Deadpool, and it was pretty badass. I'm excited to see what they do with the next one. So I'm really excited. All right, now we're going to go ahead and move on to the reason we are here tonight. One of my favorite things to talk about, because the video games in the 90s, the movies in the 90s is all great. We're going to talk about Mortal Kombat, and it's going to be fantastic. Now, Deacon, we talked about beforehand, this was something you were excited for. You're wearing the shirt.
Yeah.
You mentioned the video games earlier. Tell me about your nerdiness with this, because this started, the first game came out in 92, the second one in 93, the next game in 95, and the movies followed 95, 97.
Yeah.
It was a perfect decade for Mortal Kombat. It spawned unlimited things that happened within, and it's still going. So tell me about Mortal Kombat. What was your interaction with Mortal Kombat?
Absolutely. So, like, for me, I grew up in Long Island, New York, and we didn't have a lot of like arcades per se, but we had bowling alleys and roller rinks. And I remember the first time I saw a Mortal Kombat was at the Bayshore Roller Rink in Long Island, New York. And everybody was just sucked around it. Like every single person, this is before it was on consoles. This is, it's still kind of on its grassroots campaign. And every single person who is there is just sucked around this one arcade machine. And, there's 20, 30 cabinets in there and everyone's at this one. And everybody was just sucked into it. And then they had their first marketing campaign when the ports were going to come for the 4 systems for Genesis, Super Nintendo, Game Boy, and Game Gear. And you have this one guy in the street just stands up and he puts his arms in the air and he yells, "Mortal Kombat!" And like everybody is immediately sucked in. It's one of the best advertising grassroots kind of campaigns. You didn't need to know what the hell it was ahead of time. You hear this guy yell Mortal Kombat, and then all of a sudden you're seeing this video game action, which quite honestly had never been seen before. There were fighting games at that point, but nothing was even close to this especially in terms of violence. There's so much I can go into about these early games, but the thing that made these games more than some of the other ones, because Street Fighter 2, the original, was also out at this point. And Street Fighter 2, some people will say, is a better game engine, but there is not nearly the level of excitement as you are seeing Scorpion pull his mask off and just incinerating somebody, And they had something that the other games did not have, which was the storyline. And that's something that I know in the current iterations of Mortal Kombat, it has become just amplified exponentially compared to what it was. But Mortal Kombat, even though it was a aggressive and gory fighting game, had a story. And to learn that story, you had to play the game, especially when you got to the consoles and stuff. They wanted people to put the quarters in. But to learn the whole story, you had to beat the game with like each character, which in the original is only 7. And then it amplifies to 12 in Mortal Kombat 2. And then it goes, if I remember correctly, the original Mortal Kombat 3 was 16, and then they had to do Ultimate Mortal Kombat because they left characters out that pissed people off, so they had to redo it. And then they had Mortal Kombat Trilogy where they brought every single character who was ever in the game in. But Mortal Kombat was smarter than a lot of other games. It had secret characters you had to figure out how to find, which like something of this nature had never happened before. If you were somebody who was, again, I was 9 or 10, I was 10 when the first game came out, 9 or 10, depending on when I played it the first time. And you're playing at the arcade, and all of a sudden between rounds, this green ninja who's not part of the characters you can play as just shows up out of nowhere and gives you like this cryptic clue. You have to figure out how to find this guy. And if you do find this guy, all you want to do is like, oh my God, I found Reptile. I found the hidden character. And they continue to do this in the next couple games. I'm going to like back off a little bit and we'll go into like Easter eggs and all that kind of stuff. But Mortal Kombat was a game that had so many layers, more so than just being a fighting game. And it obviously amplified into a worldwide phenomenon. It has movies. It had several TV shows, most of which were terrible. But they had, this became like an empire of a franchise. This was not just your standard video game. This was something that was a cultural phenomenon, and it was for a reason.
Yeah, they in terms of what you said, their violence, like that's what separated them from the competition. Because like you had said, there was Street Fighter. Mm-hmm. Along with Street Fighter, there was Fists of Rage. There was like three or four of those same titles that came out, and they were very identical to Street Fighter. Mm-hmm. But the thing that was so cool about Mortal Kombat was there was no competition for them. The only competition that was on paper was that they're both listed as fighting games. But like you said, the stories, they made a story, they stuck with it, they never veered off of it, and they just kept expanding and expanding and expanding. And like they gave everybody such a great backstory and just a great story overall, because in the beginning it was just Liu Kang versus Shang Tsung, and then all of a sudden you have all these legacy characters and stuff. I mean, they, for God's sake, they created Noob Saibot, just made him out of nowhere, and they took the creators' names, wrote them backwards, and they called them Noob Saibot, which was Ed Boon and Tobias.
John Tobias.
Yep. So, the fact that they did that and Noob Saibot's such a cool character once you figured out who he was, because he was another one of those Easter egg kind of cameos for a little bit. I can't remember which game it was, but all of a sudden there's a black ninja, and you're like, "Holy crap! Who is that?" And then they made a random ass name. It's Bihan, resurrected corpse. Like, okay, I'm in. So the stories, the gore, you went from Mortal Kombat 1 and 2 just being gushes of red blood. And then you go to today's game, or the game that comes out in September, you see just somebody's head being ripped off and seeing every strand, like all the blood, all the sounds. Like, it's evolved so much, and they've never had anybody come close to what they do.
So Iron Fist, and I think what other people know it by is Tekken, I believe what you're getting at. So yeah, that was around 94 when that first one dropped. Mortal Kombat is above and beyond all of these other arcade games. And for the younger crowd that's watching, because I know we are getting some young crowd, we didn't always have them on video game consoles. We had to actually go somewhere and play them on a tabletop type style game. And so, for those of you who do go to arcades or to bowling alleys, some of them still exist out there that they still have those type of gaming things, but that's what we used to play with, where you put your quarter up because you were up next and you waited your turn to play the winner of whoever was fighting. So gaming has changed, but Mortal Kombat set the pace. It was far and above what Street Fighter ever wished to be. Even the movies, for which I know we'll talk about too, the movies for Mortal Kombat were way better than Street Fighter ever could have dreamt to be. And I was a huge Street Fighter fan personally. Like, I loved the idea of it, but it was nowhere near Mortal Kombat and what it brought to the table when it comes to violence, the fatalities, the character arcs, the storyline for it. I mean, it was a cool idea.
You said it right there, though. The key word when the game came out was fatality, because there was nothing in any game prior to that quite was like the fatality aspect of Mortal Kombat, because you literally were like, I am murdering my opponent. Like, there was, deaths on screen and stuff like that, but it was always done in like a cartoonish or comical way. This was like, you were literally, if you look at even the original game, Kano rips your heart out. Sub-Zero rips your head, your whole spine out through your head, pulling it off. Raiden electrocutes you to death. Like, these are like legitimate deaths, whereas most other games, there's like, oh, you beat them by like, just draining their power bar. So you drain their power bar and they say, finish him. And then you are going to do something that makes sure they're not coming back. That was something that was different about Mortal Kombat as opposed to these other games. And there was, those of you who remember it, that went to like Congress and stuff. They had the video game rating system was highly influenced because of Mortal Kombat. That is the primary game that brought the video game rating system to the forefront. Like, if Mortal Kombat did not exist, I'm sure it would have come eventually, but that is the game that made that happen.
And so to kind of dive off of what you were saying about movies and the shows and all that, the main topic, which is the movie, which I feel like, just thinking of what you guys have been saying, the way I feel like Mortal Kombat has transcended time, pretty much. It's lasted my entire life, your guys' lives, so I've always come to appreciate like comeback stories almost, because they did their thing, Mortal Kombat 1, 2. Then they went crazy. Armageddon had every single person. They tried some spin-offs. Then, like the whole Disney thing we were talking about earlier, they kind of were like, we should probably worry about quality over quantity. Then they reboot everything, right? So you got Mortal Kombat 9, 10, 11. Great
9 was a game changer.
Yeah, those were incredible games. And the new one, MK1, coming out September, looks amazing. But they kind of picked themselves up because they were in such huge demand. Everybody wanted more. And then they kind of fell to the wayside. But I kind of feel like without the movie, it'd still have a huge fan base. But this movie was before superhero movies. They were trying to dip into those. But the fact that they came out with a movie with the most iconic theme song that you could think of. The casting was
Ever.
perfect. Yeah. The second you sat down in the movie theater and got through the credits, that thing blared through the speakers and you were jacked.
You're not even through the credits. The New Line symbol has not even hit the whole screen yet, and they've screamed Mortal Kombat, and you're already excited.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I just remember every time I watch the movie, I'm like, I'm jacked right now because I'm so excited. But then they go even further. They knock it out of the park with casting. Like, I'm not gonna tear apart his name, but the guy who played Shang Tsung was
Carrie Fujiwara.
Yeah. That guy's transcended time. Like, he hasn't had very many things, but now he's back in the games as
He's the basis of the character in the game now. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about Robert Downey Jr. casting kind of thing, like Ryan Reynolds Deadpool kind of thing. Like, that guy's, I really wish I knew how to say his name, but he's synonymous with Shang Tsung forever because he's immortalized in the games now. Like, and then Liu Kang was great. Who else would you have found during that era besides Robin Shue? And then
it's supposed to be Brandon Lee is who they wanted. Bruce Lee, and obviously what happened with the Crow stopped that. But Robin Shue was a great casting choice. You know, he wasn't really well known in this. He was more of a stuntman overseas, but that was picture perfect casting.
Right.
I was actually sitting here thinking I loved everyone that played in this role, and as a kid, it was funny. Shang Tsung was also the grandfather of Johnny Tsunami, and so for me, that's what I knew him for as well. But I loved it. You're correct, 100%. The casting for that first movie was absolutely incredible. Sonya Blade, Miss Veronica Vaughn, who I will always have a giant crush on.
You know that it was not supposed to be her.
Yes.
It was Cameron Diaz who got injured and couldn't fulfill the role, and they had to come back. Bridget Wilson had auditioned, didn't go through the process because she got offered Billy Madison, so she dropped out and then got brought back in the last second because Billy Madison had wrapped.
So I loved her in that movie, and what was great was she matched what her character did in the game, the way her fighting stance and style. They all did. And it was fantastic. I loved it. I think it's a movie that still holds up. I just watched it like 3 days ago, prepping for this. I love it. I have so much to say about the second movie, which isn't positive, so we'll wait before we even get to that. But that first movie was great. It set the tone for what the game was and for what we could have expected for the Mortal Kombat franchise from then on. Just awesome.
Yeah, it was like I said, soundtrack, casting, even the fight scenes. Like, if you didn't do those good or even appealing, it would have sucked. But when it comes to think of everything that this movie wasn't, it was the Street Fighter movie, sadly. So everything this movie was, Street Fighter was the complete opposite, which is why it failed so hard. But the choreography, to this day, I still tell my wife, like, Johnny Cage versus Scorpion is probably, I watched it again. The choreography isn't as good as what we get today, but I was like, in terms of excitement and how fucking cool the set was and what they tried to do with the teleporting and the shadow kick, like, and is it harpoon? No, it's not harpoon, but I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, his spear. So, they put their own twist on it. It was alive, but I didn't care because that fight scene was magical. That's my favorite fights. One of my favorite fight scenes, top 5, just because of how cool it was to see these two characters I played on a video game look exactly like that. But instead of playing, A, they're going nuts. And it was amazing.
That is the best fight in the movie, in my opinion. But one thing you like, piggybacking on what both of you said, if I were to play you the soundtrack without showing you the movie, I bet you would know what fight it was from, because that's how good the soundtrack was for this movie. everything is so identifiable. I could just play you the score of the soundtrack, and you'd be like, that's when Scorpion's fighting Johnny Cage. That's when Liu Kang is fighting Reptile. Like that, it's so high pitched and adrenaline inducing and iconic. And there's things about the score. You know, the score is so 90s, but in the best way. The best way you could have it identified as its time. And on top of that, like, you have this absolutely legendary score, like soundtrack score. That soundtrack was #1 on Billboard for like 6 weeks or something like that, which is insane to think about. And then you also have just, this movie is not a huge budget. It really is. It's like, even if at the time it's not a big budget movie, but you have this giant puppet Goro that you believe is actually, like, he's there and it's a fucking puppet, but you believe in it because of the way that they portray it. And just the way that they put everything into the movie, it fit the theme of Mortal Kombat. It fit the storyline of Mortal Kombat. And even though, yes, sure, is it dated? Sure, absolutely. Like, if you show it to a kid who's 10 years old today, they probably like, this is cheesy. But for somebody like our age, it holds up surprisingly well.
Yes,
it really did. Rewatchability is easy. Like, when it pops up on my HBO Max, I'm like, okay, I'm in. You know, we watched it the other day, which, by the way, Ryan, you touched on it, but Melissa and I are going to watch Annihilation after this. Oh, I'm not excited. I am, just for how bad. What I tried to explain to her is, it was so bad, just so bad. But I was like, again, there was a certain level of entertainment that I watched the damn thing, but God, at the end, I felt dirty. I was like, oh, this just feels wrong.
I saw Annihilation in theaters.
Oof.
And so here's the thing. I saw it the first time and I was just completely just dumb. You know, it's 97, so I'm 14 at the time. And, you know, when you're 14, you don't really have a palette for what's a good movie and what's not. And I was like, what did I just watch? Here's the thing, that there's 2 things I want to bring up about Annihilation before we deep dive into it. First things first is that they were doing test screenings of the movie, and apparently they had one. The version they had was not completed special effects. And they put a test screening in front of an audience, and the audience gave it like okay scores. New Line knew this was a train wreck, and they were like, they gave it an okay score. We're not putting any more money into it. Put it out how it is. So that's exactly the reason that this movie has the special effects and the look that it does. And the other thing is, if you watch it like at our age now, knowing what it is, you watch it the first time, you're just going to point out how bad it is. You watch it a second time, you're like, oh, that's hilariously bad. You watch it the third time, you're rolling with the punches and having a good time.
Yeah, it was so rough. But when I think of what I remember a lot of bad. We can talk about the whole movie being bad, but I remember Sonya Blade versus Cyrax was entertaining. See, that was an entertaining fight. What other fight was entertaining? The Scorpion versus Sub-Zero one was entertaining for as little as it lasted.
The 45 seconds it lasted.
Yeah. So I thought it was those certain fan service things that they tried to reel you back from, but they weren't nearly as good and well thought and put production-wise into as the first one, which was so disappointing because the second one had so much potential to be greater. Like, if they would have came at it with the same mentality, let's take our time, because again, this was back in time where everybody wanted more. They wanted more. They got the movie, come out with a second one already. Why isn't it out yet? Like, people had no patience. I don't either, because 2025 is a long time away from Superman and Avengers. But it was one of those things, quantity over quality, and it showed in that movie. But if they would have knocked it out of the park, like, easily had a trilogy, like, it was ruined. They really ruined their chances. on the movie screen, and up until as of late, the new movie wasn't terrible. It wasn't my favorite. MK the '90s is still my favorite Mortal Kombat, but the movie wasn't terrible. The new movie wasn't terrible.
So I'm gonna go ahead and just throw out the elephant in the room there. The recasting of some of the beloved characters was horrendous, in my opinion. Sonya Blade, the new Sonya Blade, yeah, that fight scene with Cyrax was cool, but she wasn't Sonya Blade to me. Jax's character was underserved by a lot for what he could have been. But then also, and I don't know how this is going to go over with what the show crew, Christopher Lambert is my Raiden. James Remar, come on. And I know there's a whole thing there with what the show, and it'll come up when we do an episode with you guys again, or go back and watch it. James Remar appears on your guys' show a lot in a way. So, you guys are grown.
I'll explain it. So there is a friend of our show, his name's Jeff Alterman, who we got into this long running bit where we started calling him a jabroni a lot. Like, I don't even know I don't remember how it started. It's been going so long. I don't even remember how or why it started. And then one night we were in our What the Show group chat, and somehow the conversation of Cameo came up, and we're like, we should get somebody funny to just roast Jeff. And we're going through the list, and we found James Remar, and he was not very funny. And we're like, oh my God, let's see if he'll do it. And the video we got from James Remar was so freaking funny. And so James Remar has been our hero ever since. He literally calls him up. Ryan, I might just send you the video right now, and you can.
Yeah, dude, I'll throw it up there. If you send it to me, I'll throw it up. Yeah, no problem.
I will send that to you right now. It'll take a couple minutes to go through, but this video was so ridiculous that the whole time we sent out the Cameo request, and we're like, oh, this wouldn't it be funny if we got James Remar to call Jeff a jabroni, and we gave him a couple of bullet points, and he went at it so hard that James Remar has become a hero to the What the Show crew. And I understand for anybody who doesn't have this attachment to it, that his casting is incredibly jarring compared to Lambert, because they play the roles so different. It is incredibly different. And James Remar is definitely more active in the movie than Lambert is, because Lambert is basically there to crack jokes, and he doesn't really get involved in much of the action, whereas Remar does. He's a bigger part of the action part of the movie. Lambert had a great voice. I will say that outright. Lambert, he spoke, and he's kind of looking at the camera the whole time when he speaks. He's I don't think so. And wink,
he was cool.
Yeah.
He was cool. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but he was cool. I thought their voices are very different, but Lambert's voice was just so cool because he was always calm and collected. And when he yelled, it changed the scene a little bit. But James Remar, oh my God. I see the fandom. I do, but next time you talk to him, tell him Mortal Kombat 2 was not it.
Well, and that's the thing. Mortal Kombat 2 tanked at the box office. I'd have to double check the numbers, but I'm pretty certain Mortal Kombat, the original's opening weekend, made more than Annihilation did overall. So I'm relatively certain of that. Annihilation, I noticed this. One of the things, I see you have it, but I'll say one thing before you do that. Annihilation was when we went to HD TVs, when we started getting better quality TVs. Oh my God, the special effects when you have the high quality TV look so incredibly bad. You could hide it on VHS a little bit, but now that you're talking 4K TVs and stuff, it's awful, but in a fun way.
Well, and that's the thing is too. So in Mortal Kombat, the first movie was graphically, visually pleasing, very pleasing. All the fight scenes, everything you could have wanted.
Mostly practical effects.
Yes.
Mostly.
Yes. I mean, I wanted more from the Sub-Zero fight because Sub-Zero was my favorite to play in the video games, and I wanted more of that. But having Scorpion use his tagline of "Get over here, come here," all that was badass. But in Annihilation, when you get the final fight between Shao Kahn and Liu Kang, and the animality of the shitty ass dragon and the horrible Hydra, it just looks bad.
It's terrible.
It's two things swinging at each other, but never actually touching. If you pay attention to the dragon fighting the Hydra, he doesn't ever really touch any of the heads, and you're just like,
right,
what?
Yeah, they make no contact,
none whatsoever. But I will say I do love one of my favorite things from that movie itself was the voice of one of the elder gods, that deep voice in Mortal Kombat. Like it set the tone so well for what I wanted. There were so many Easter eggs from the games that were in the movie. It was fantastic.
One of my other favorite things, though, and this is maybe you know this, maybe you don't, but 2 of the actors in this movie were American gladiators.
One of them was the big centaur dude, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
So Motaro was American Gladiator Malibu, who was only on the first season.
Yeah. Who's the other one?
And Jax was American Gladiator Saber.
That's right.
I can't believe I didn't put that together, man.
I couldn't picture him because I just watched the first one and it was a different Jax.
Yep.
So then they recasted him. So I was sitting here the whole time thinking, I was like, that's not the same. But yep, in the second one, that's wow.
The original Jax passed away before they filmed the second movie.
That's right. Okay, yeah, that's right. I remember reading that now. So okay, we're gonna do this a little Easter egg real quick that Mike sent me. So this is Mr. James Remar.
Hey Jeff, James Remar here, Lord Raiden from Mortal Kombat Annihilation. Hey pal, I am told that this is from What the Show, and that you're a jabroni. Okay, man. Well, you got to put down the Appletini because the best Raiden said you got to do that, pal, because it is not weak to value life. You know, Shao Kahn and all those jerk-offs out there in Outworld, you know, you don't want nothing to do with those guys. So you're a jabroni. You got to put down the Appletini. And What the Show says you only watch a movie once in a calendar year because it's letterboxed. I don't understand any of that. But you know what? I'm coming to you from one of my favorite places in the world. It's Griffith Park here in Los Angeles, near Hollywood. And that's where I live. I work here too. All right, Jeff, you take care, pal. And, I guess your buddies love you over at What the Show, and I don't even know what a jabroni is. And, and Lord Raiden should know everything because he's the god of thunder. All right. From the best Lord Raiden, Mortal Kombat Annihilation, James Remar saying, Jeff, so long, pal. Put down the Appletini.
It's hilarious. He doesn't know what a jabroni is because his voice sounds like The Rock's almost. Uh-huh. I hear it a little bit, and I'm like, he doesn't know what a jabroni is. That's awesome.
So I've seen this video. I don't know how many times now, just being around you guys and being a part of What the Show, but the fact that he quotes himself, "It's not weak to value life," which I will say was one of my favorite quotes in that entire movie. So I love that. But just hearing his voice, you're like, bro, you're not Raiden, man. But,
compared to what they set up in one.
Highlander is my Raiden. Highlander is 100% my Raiden. So
I was also immediately turned off from Annihilation when they killed Johnny Cage in the first 5 minutes.
In the first 5, well, that's why Lyndon Ashby did not come back. Like he got the script and he saw that. I'm like, you had the person who, realistically, of the whole cast, was the one who went over the most in that movie. Mm-hmm. Lyndon Ashby as Johnny Cage was probably, if you had no idea what Mortal Kombat was before you saw the movie, that's probably who the favorite character was most likely Lyndon Ashby as Johnny Cage. And they they gave him that treatment. And it's unfortunate because Lyndon Ashby nailed that role in the first one.
He's amazing.
What's scary is the person who filled in for him looked an awful lot like him. It was nuts. I recognized the difference, but I remember I was like, he did really good trying to replace him, but they did
have really good look like. But if you pay attention, you notice there is that difference between the two, for sure. It
snapped his neck.
I mean, just watching the first 5 minutes of the movie, and you knew it was gonna be crap just by the casting. Like right then and there, just like, come on.
When they killed him, when they killed him, there was no more humor. Like the humor kind of went out the window. Like you killed that guy. Like come on.
Well,
they tried to put Jax in that role, and it did not. Like American Gladiator Saber does not have the same gravitas that Lyndon Ashby does.
Yeah. It was, it was way different because, I mean, you needed the humor in a movie like that for sure. But getting rid of Johnny Cage and then recasting Raiden, you're just like, okay, because Raymar tried to be somewhat humorous in the movie as well.
Right.
But it just didn't have that same energy behind it from the first one. That, like you said, the way he talked to the camera, the way he said things was so godlike, I guess the best way to put it.
It was articulate.
Yes, there we go. Thank you. Best way. But I don't know, man. I mean, they rushed it is what happened. They made a crappy movie, but the first one still holds up to this day. The video games are still hands down one of my favorite things to ever come from video games. So Josh, we already set ours, Sub-Zero, to be kind of our characters that we like to play. Did you have one when you played the game? Who is your go-to?
Probably Johnny Cage.
Yeah.
Like, he was cool. He was just cool. He always had his sunglasses on. He was modeled after Jean-Claude Van Damme, which is weird because then Van Damme went on to play Guile in Street Fighter.
Yep.
But Johnny Cage was always cool. Liu Kang was always OP for me. If I needed to win, it was Liu Kang. I liked Smoke when you could play him. Was it 3, right?
Yep.
3 is where you could play Smoke, and I thought Smoke was just fucking cool because you had blue, yellow, you had green, and then there's the women with green, pink, purple. Smoke was just gray. He was awesome. Like, I don't know. I like the cameo kind of ninjas like Noob Saibot and Smoke, but probably Liu Kang or Johnny Cage. Liu Kang got me past Shang Tsung and Shao Kahn.
That's what I wanted to say is like Mortal Kombat 1, I could beat with the whole all 7 characters I could beat the game with. 2 became very difficult to get to the end. 2 is actually an insanely hard video game to get to the end. If you got there, it wasn't too difficult. 3, I could get to Shao Kahn with almost anybody, but I could only beat him with Sub-Zero. So, because Shao Kahn in Mortal Kombat 3 is quite possibly the hardest boss I can think of in any game of all time.
I remember that being extremely difficult. Yes. It's been a while. I'm going to have to pick that up and see if I can find some old school versions of that game to play again.
The only way I could beat 3 was with Sub-Zero because I would freeze him and then do the combos, which did next to no damage, but you could freeze him again because Shao Kahn basically blocked any character that you had any special attack with, and then would do 2 moves and you're dead. Right. So like that was the only character in that game. Whereas in 1 and 2, it was not out of the question to use anybody to get past it. 2 is insanely hard to get to Shao Kahn, but if you got there, say you lost on purpose, you could switch the character and beat him. But
so speaking of Shao Kahn, before we get too far away, Brian Thompson, who played Shao Kahn in the movies, what did you think? I know you're going to rewatch it here soon, Josh, and I want your opinion later, but what did you think is his role as Shao Kahn? Someone who's supposed to be a menacing figure. Yeah, I felt the same way. I was not someone that I took serious.
Shang Tsung is a much more menacing villain in the first one than Shao Kahn is in the second. And Shao Kahn in video game lore is supposed to be a step above him.
And he wasn't.
The only thing that did it for me was his voice, because he had a commanding voice, but he was dead on arrival for me when he first showed up in the movie. And I remember this because I showed Melissa a trailer for the second one. So I was like, you got to make sure, you got to let me know you're in just by watching this trailer because you can't back out. But when he gets on stage, he has his helmet on with the skull, but the skull's made out of fucking leather. Like you could see it flapping up, and I'm like, is it really that hard to get like just a fake skull to put right there? Like, oh, that bug! When I saw that, I was like, I'm out. I'm just simple things like that just showed me how cheap they really went on it, or they meant it to be leather, which is just a terrible, terrible choice.
So this is the other thing they did that like kind of ruined Shao Kahn a little bit to me is in Annihilation they pulled one thing from Mortal Kombat 4, which was Shinnok, which is the elder god Shinnok, who's supposed to be their father, and Shao Kahn is like trying to impress him the entire movie. And then the games 2 and 3, Shinnok is not in those games. This is just Shao Kahn being the overlord, the big badass. And he's trying to like prove himself. I'm like, what is going on here? That's not what this was at all. 4 had come out right around the same time that Annihilation did.
I think so.
Right, arcades at the very least. And so Shinnok is not at this point a well-established thing. Because like, yes, the arcade versions obviously are the originals, but most people knew it from the home consoles. You knew it from the Genesis, from the Super Nintendo, and the portable ones. But if you had not had any exposure to 4 at that point, which you wouldn't have unless you were arcade at this point when it came out, why would Shao Kahn graveling to Shinnok mean anything? It shouldn't.
Right.
Shang Tsung did not do anything in the first one where he was like groveling to Shao Kahn, even though that's already established in the canon. So, yeah, they did a big disservice to the character just in the script right off the bat.
Well, I mean, in the video games, Shao Kahn was brought back Shang Tsung, gave him his youth, gave him his fighting ability in the video games, and he was the big baddie again. And it's, I mean, granted, they didn't have to do that. I get why they progressed it, but they could have given Shao Kahn more of a power base, more of something to fear. But he wasn't. We didn't fear him.
Well, remember the very, very end of the first movie, Shao Kahn comes up, and
his face, his image is over the City of Light. Yeah.
And then they all get into the pose, and then the music hits, and it's a perfect ending. Like it's a perfect ending to set up the next movie, and then they start the next one. And Shao Kahn's just a dude.
Yeah,
right.
that movie is just so. I don't know. If I want my Mortal Kombat fix, I go into YouTube. I put on 9, 10, or 11's cutscenes, the full movie, and it's so much entertainment. They're like 4 hours long, but the only thing it skips over is the fights. But the stories are so good, especially this rebooted. Well, they rebooted it again, but. Where they started out fresh again with legacy characters, and then 10 was what their kids were in it. They tried to make that a thing that didn't catch on, so then they made 11, which was incredible. They made Shang Tsung his own man kind of thing. Like he was always mischievous, I guess you could say, to Shao Kahn, but in that game he took over. It was awesome. So I'm so excited for the game in September. I don't know if I'm going to buy it yet, but it's so tempting.
So with the game coming out, and my plan is because we didn't get to cover everything today when it comes to Mortal Kombat, because we really wanted to focus on the 90s, big things. I do want to come back and we'll talk about the reboot movie of 2021. We'll talk about the cartoon movies that were out after in the early 2000s, later 2000s, but also talk about the new video games that have come out. So that is something that we will cover. Mike, if you guys want to come back for that, we'd love to have you back for those ones too as well.
You said the word.
Because I'd love to deep dive those. I'll need to deep dive into the cartoons a lot more because the 95 cartoon, that one season, was the thing I remembered.
Terrible.
I liked it personally, so I can't find it anywhere, which makes me sad.
Defenders of the Realm was not good.
It gave me Stryker though, and I liked Stryker. So we'll go ahead. We'll get into those.
Wait. Repeat that.
No, it's okay. We won't talk about that. We won't talk about Stryker. I like Stryker's character. But it was a whole thing, and they gave more of a feeling for Nightwolf too. So, they introduced him into the cartoon like that. But yeah, you're right though. 97 was when Annihilation came out and Mortal Kombat 4 came out. So they did pull from that to make it happen. So we've ran pretty long tonight, and I want to make sure that we don't lose people too late into the shows. So. We deep dive pretty far. We'll go into a deeper deep dive for the newer ones. But before we move it on, Mike, tell us where people can find you, where people can come talk to you and enjoy your stuff, because I enjoyed our conversation tonight, and there's so much more to have.
Absolutely. And so my regular show, like I said, is What the Show on Wednesday nights. We do all sorts of crazy random stuff. If you're watching this right now, very recently we had Sister Sarah on, which we were so excited to have her, because she does not do a lot of appearances. So that was such a fun night. We also have our fantasy football league, which we are going to be doing a focus on coming up in the upcoming weeks. So you'll see a lot on that. But the other thing, speaking of football, you can also find me on the Notorious by Chance channel with Chance Ellison and Jacob Blunden. On Tuesday nights, I do a show called Left Side, Strong Side, where we do all things NFL. At the moment, we're not doing a lot because we're in the off season, but come football season, training camps, we will do that every Tuesday night at usually 9:00 Eastern. Occasionally we have to pivot on times, but yeah, you can find us there. And also have to send out the plugs. You can also occasionally find me on Benny and Moose Save America on The Last American Heroes on this channel right here. I always love anytime that I've appeared on this. And if you have not yet seen it, definitely check out Jake Iacovetta versus PLD, which I happen to be the guest bartender on. It's a bloodbath.
Yeah, I believe that. Everyone else should go check out our Kevin Smith match that we did.
Yes.
Our Power Hour match. We ended up turning out to a Power 2-hour match, and we all
almost
got,
three.
Almost
unedited, almost three.
Yeah, it was a long one. Josh, anything you want to leave with the fans before we call? As I catch you in between drinks, anything you want to say to the fans before we call it a night?
No. Thanks for watching. I know this went a little bit longer than we wanted it to, but it's hard to shut up. It really is. Like, I keep looking at the clock and I'm like, I can go for another hour.
Yeah, same.
But no, man, it was awesome to have you on. First guest, great. You and I have a lot we could probably go over, debate on. So much fun. So we should do it again. But other than that, so much fun. Appreciate you guys.
Really, yeah.
I was going to say, you have an open invite to come on What the Show.
I'm in. Set something up. I'll come on. I love this. This is awesome.
It's and with What the Show, and like I told you backstage when I kind of gave you an insight about them, I love that group. It's a lot of fun to just talk and bullshit, and it's random topics, whatever you decide we want to talk about that night, man. And it's a good time. So I may crash that one too, just because I like being on their show. So
you have an open invite. So.
It's one of my favorite shows to be on for sure. So everyone who's watching, go check it out. What the Show. These guys do amazing stuff. They also do their monthly charity things. So you guys, raise money for charities each month, and it changes. And we're huge fans of that. Us here at the Last American Heroes Network love that you guys do that, and we are big fans.
And speaking of that, the month of July, we did a trivia event in June, and Moose happened to be the MVP, lasted the longest in it. So we let him choose the charity of the month. So we're doing everything for the Make-A-Wish Foundation for the entire month of July. All donations we get, any money we get in July is all going to Make-A-Wish, and that was Moose's request. So yeah, if you donate anything to our stream, it's all going to Make-A-Wish.
Yeah, that's the great thing about you guys. Everything you guys take in for donations goes straight to the charity that's picked. And I love it. Make-A-Wish hits home for me and Haas. We have some family members who, he probably gave some backstory for it, but it's something that hits home for us. So we really appreciate you guys out there doing that, these type of things. Yeah, man. And I loved having you here, and we'll probably see you again soon. Everyone else, all viewers, thank you again for watching. You guys have been fantastic, getting us over 300 on our other two episodes. I have a feeling this one's going to do the exact same numbers, if not better, because Deacon, you were amazing, and I loved the conversations that we had. And we're hoping to get some What the Show fans to come over and give us a watch as well. But everyone, remember to click like, subscribe, and check out all the episodes on the Last American Heroes Network. Benny and Moose Save America, our trivia show, as well as my other show, Beyond the Neon Veil, which we talk about Las Vegas and some of the bullshit that people get into here. Josh actually was my first guest on that show as well. So go back and check out that episode. It was hilarious. People have quoted to me some of the things that you've said from that episode, like the big girl that fell down
Big tree fall hard.
I learned that exact quote. I had people say that to me more than once, and it was hilarious. But thank you all for coming tonight. We love you all. We'll see you all next time.